Because
We'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark,
Here.
Cindy,
Excused?
Nancy,
yes,
Eric,
Here.
Kurt,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
Bob,
Here. Okay, we have 6 assembly members present, and Cindy Lagadakis is excused. She's traveling. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Approval of minutes. Is there any amendment to today's meeting agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve today's meeting agenda.
so move.
Second.
Okay, is there any amendments? See no hands. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll stay with the printed agenda. Next thing on the agenda is item 5A. It's a public hearing, and it's on ordinance 2017-04. And that is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, section 14.16, electricity, to add a municipal power rate for municipal buildings of the Petersburg Borough as designated and approved by the Borough Assembly. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to during this public hearing? Okay, please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
Hello, I'm Liz Woodyard from Petersburg Medical Center. I'm representing the hospital. Is there?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Well, I would just like to comment and thank you for the opportunity to comment on the municipal rate. And I know at the last meeting that you approved this for the schools, but not for the borough buildings or the hospital. And I wasn't really sure if I understood the reasoning for the decision not to support the hospital, but I'd like to answer any questions if you do have any questions for me about that. But I would like to just explain that the savings of $41,000 per year would be very helpful to the hospital. When we first started meeting, we met with Borough, school, and hospital representatives to talk about ways to be more efficient and to reduce cost that all of us will be having because, of course, with the state budget, we're getting cuts and various federal programs are going away. And so we thought it would be a good way to reduce some of the burden on both the schools and the borough buildings and the hospital. And so I thought this was a good idea. I would support this without an undue burden on the taxpayers by,
Excuse me, Liz,
Yeah.
does anybody have any idea what the,
Working on the siding, I believe.
oh, maybe we could ask them to,
Working on a different side.
I'll go talk to him.
Oh, thank you, Kelly.
please?
Thank you. Oh, you're going to send him a
Sorry,
text?
Liz.
Oh, no,
Give us
that's-
a minute, maybe we
yeah.
won't have to listen to the woodpecker on the side of the building.
It's not distracting at all.
No, I didn't, I could turn off my hearing aids and it wouldn't hurt. but-
I thought it was right.
Well, maybe they'll take a break, so
All right.
you want to continue. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Well, just a couple things that are facing the hospital this next year is one of them is on the behalf with GCI, we get it's called USAC. We get a fund from GCI that helps support our telecommunication, our bandwidth. That got reduced by $20,000 that we just got a letter about last week. And then also in the state legislature this year, for sure, we're going to have a 5% reduction in Medicaid, and we don't know exactly what other cuts will be happening. So the $41,000, I could rest assured to the borough, I know our board would have to vote on this, but we would set that money aside for either capital improvements or future hospital needs. So it wouldn't go into the day-to-day operations. If that was a concern, I think that maybe some of the assembly members had. But times are tough, and this was just a way to really garner some support for the things that we're going to be facing in the next election year and the next year with
Okay,
the budget.
thank you. Liz, is there any questions of Liz? All right, doesn't appear so, so thank you. Anybody else in the audience that would like to testify under this public hearing for ordinance 2017-04?
Well, I'm Darlene Whitethorn, and I'm the board president. And I am a little bit concerned as to why we were left out. And I was wondering if anyone could answer that question for me, if you would be willing to, or if you just...
Well, I wasn't here, Darlene, but I listened to that part of the meeting. I think it was just through a group of amendments, instead of having all of the municipal buildings included, it went down right to the school. And was it you, Kurt, that made that?
Well, yeah, it was a
believe-
population of 14. How many buildings did you guys throw in there, Steve? How many municipal buildings we have?
The initial thing that was put forward was any borough-owned building, which would be hospital, school, and borough itself, that were classified as large commercial. So 12 to 14, give or take.
Right.
And then it was kind of whittled down through the borough assembly's actions to just be the school.
Right. At the time I voted for that. Can I comment?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
The time I voted for that and made that amendment was, I felt like it was too big of a bite to take off right now. I mean, you guys generate about $13 million a year, which to me is an enterprise fund. I mean, the municipal building doesn't generate any money. The school doesn't really generate any money. They don't have any ways of generating any money. And that is why we decided to leave it off, at least for me, that we left it off this time around, because we felt like that, you guys should be able to work within your budget, like the Harbor does, and like Power and Light and everybody else, to try to come up with that little bit of savings. And I feel as though if the public wants to go that route, then I will certainly entertain the idea of, doing that with all municipal buildings. But in the meantime, it didn't seem like we hardly had a lot of support to even go with the school. But we needed to go with somebody because, like I said earlier today on Borough Business, is that it comes out of our pockets no matter what. Whether I take it out of my right-hand pocket or my left-hand pocket, whether it comes out of mill rate or comes out of city sales tax, it all comes out
Or
somewhere.
the utilities.
Or utilities. Well, that's why I was thinking we would use utilities so that we could get everybody to pay for it, instead of just those taxpayers. So anyway, that's the reason why we did it that way. It was just because it was too big of a chunk to go after just in one time. So we decided to take a little bite.
I do appreciate that, Kurt. I'm glad, and I'm really glad that you decided to go with the school, because I agree, they are our children. Mm-hmm. But remember that all of us will probably use the hospital from one time to another, and we do generate money. However, we cannot change our rates willy-nilly, and we have to go with what's customary and regular. And also, we have to do what Medicare says. We can't just, or not Medicare, but Medicaid. We can't just change them and say, well, we need more money, we need to raise our rates. We cannot do that. So we do generate a lot of money, but we also have a lot of outlay. And if I would have known this was going to go this way, I would have brought our financial statement with me so you could see that. But I would ask you to consider reconsidering it, because it's $41,000. It's not a large amount of money, and as Liz said, we want to use that money either for capital projects, which we have a lot of them coming up, or put into our building fund, because that may be an issue down the line too. So, thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, thank you, Darlene. Any other questions by any assembly members? Okay, anybody else want to participate in the public hearing on ordinance 2017-04?
Hello, my name's Kathy Reamer, and I'm representing the hospital board as well. I just wanted to kind of give a little historical perspective of our hospital. The city, until 1955, the city actually owned and operated the hospital. And it wasn't until that the new, which is no longer in existence, hospital was built in 1955, they operated it until then. And Ernie Haugen just, at the completion of the hospital, which I have to say, lots and lots of people did lots and lots of work to do. It was amazing, the amount of volunteer work and help that community members did to bring that hospital to fruition in 1955. But Ernie Haugen said, I think we have a big enough operation here, so the hospital, we need a hospital board to run it because it's really too much. You know, they were paying all the salaries, hiring all the staff, and doing all that kind of stuff. And the hospital had, hospital board and the Borough Assembly had or City Council had a really good working relationship at that time. And I think that, I just believe that our community really likes having a good hospital. I think people, you know, may grumble because costs are high, prices are high, or this or that. But boy, oh boy, anytime you or your loved one goes into that emergency room, they're given 100% care. Anytime, you know, something happens, I mean, they really take good care of us, no matter who you are or what you think about anything, or whether or not you can pay. And that's another thing we have to think about, that they take every single person through their doors, whether they can pay or not. So I just hope that the support of our community, that we continue to support our hospital, and this is maybe one small way that the Borough Assembly can show that they value the people that work there, they value the effort that those folks make to make Petersburg a better place. And so anyway, I thought I wanted to say that.
Thanks, Kathy. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to participate in this public hearing on ordinance 2017-04? Okay, seeing none, that public hearing is closed. We have two public hearings tonight. The second one is on ordinance 2017-05. This is an ordinance proposing an amendment to the Home Rule Charter of Petersburg Borough to allow the city of Kupernof to own and operate a harbor within the Petersburg Borough, and directing that the proposed charter amendment be submitted to the qualified voters of the borough. Is there anybody who'd like to participate in that public hearing? Okay, seeing no interest, that public hearing is closed. Next item on the agenda is bid awards. There are none listed, so we'll move to the next item, which is item 7, and that's visitors' views related to items on today's agenda. Is there any visitors in the audience that would like to speak to items on today's agenda? Step forward and, okay, I don't see any hands going up. Next item on the agenda is visitors' views unrelated to items on today's agenda. This is the time for people in the audience to speak to the agenda items today, or otherwise you will not have another chance during the meeting. Okay, see none, we'll move forward. Board, commission, and committee reports, there are none. There's nothing under the consent agenda on today's agenda. Report of other officers. We'll start with the mayor's report. A lot of it's kind of repetitive, but we'll go through it again anyway. We're seeking letters of interest. The borough is seeking letters of interest from Petersburg residents willing to serve on the hospital board until the October 2017 municipal election. The hospital board has 2 vacant seats. Letters of interest may be addressed to the borough clerk and emailed to dthompson@petersburgak.gov or mailed to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska 99833, or dropped off at the Borough Administration Office at 12 South Nordic Drive. Also, we have Historic Preservation Commission seats that we need to fill. We're seeking letters of interest for 3 vacant seats on the Historic Preservation Commission. The first seat is reserved for archaeologist or at-large member, and the term of the seat ends 12/31/17. The second seat is reserved for an assembly member with a term ending 12/31/2019. A third seat is reserved for a planning commissioner with a term ending 12/31/18. Letters of interest may be submitted to the borough clerk as outlined earlier in this report. Made a trip to Ketchikan last week. The main purpose of the trip was to go down for a Southeast Alaska Power Agency meeting. It was just kind of a routine meeting. We did hire a new engineer to replace Eric Wolf. He will be living in Ketchikan, so that will be nice. We won't be paying the travel costs back and forth. Not much else to report on SEPA. Attended the U.S. Ketchikan commissioning of its first fast response cutter, the John McCormick. That was quite a ceremony. They're also going to be commissioning the second FRC, fast response cutter, in Juneau, in early June. That's going to be called the Bailey Barco. And I was asked at the Southeast Conference, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, by Doug Ward. He's on the commissioning committee, and it went right over my head, but they were looking for donations for if people wanted to donate to the commissioning committee. So I don't know if the borough's interested, but they'll accept money from individuals or businesses, and you could send them to Doug Ward, and if anybody's interested, get a hold of me, and I could give you his, or just to Vigor Shipyard in Ketchikan, you can get a hold of Doug Ward. Also, I've been talking with a gentleman named Mark Shear. He's involved with the mariculture in Southeast Alaska issue, and he's offered to come to Petersburg early May to give a presentation. And I was wondering, Steve, if that was going to take place, if Liz would be a good person to PEDC to get a hold of him. So does that sound like would be a good opportunity? Assembly members, have him come and address the public fishermen. Seems like, with the what am I trying to think of, the oysters and seaweed growing and all that stuff that's coming online. They've got a lot of new information. So after the visit last Monday, when Congressman Young was in town, in the room here in the assembly chambers, and we had a dinner that night, and I forgot to talk with the CEO of the hospital and introduce him, but the next day we went up, Chad Paget, his state director, and I went up and talked with Jennifer Briner about the hospital, needs and wants. So, and pretty sure Chad has responded to her already. So, also, the update on the OHV initiative petition. Is that off-highway vehicle? Is that local resident Richard Burke has refiled a new initiative petition application. The borough attorney is currently reviewing the application. Also, the fluoride initiative petition application. Local resident Holly Wingy has filed an initiative petition application to place the question of whether to stop the addition of fluoride to Petersburg's water supply on the October 2017 municipal election ballot. I believe that's with the attorney as well.
Yes.
And then we are being asked by Finance Director Jody Tao to either schedule a work session or a special meeting to review the proposed fiscal year 2018 general fund budget. She'd like us to pick a day before April 26th, so 9 days from now, between now and then, that will work for either a work session or a special meeting to review the proposed 2018 general fund budget. If a work session is chosen, no amendments to the proposed budget may be decided on by the Assembly during the review. That we'd have to actually schedule a special meeting to take any action. So,
Or change it in the first reading.
Oh, pardon me?
Or change it in the first reading.
I suppose we could.
Sorry,
Yeah,
not to cut
yeah.
off.
So that's just reading what was presented here to me. So what works for a date for people? For me, it'd be better if it wasn't in the middle of the day, unless it was over lunchtime, and whoever wants to do it at lunchtime makes the sandwiches. So any ideas? Evening, right after work, 5 o'clock, what works?
8 o'clock in the morning?
Are you thinking,
Probably better for me than afternoons.
are you
About
think,
6 a.m.
Perfect.
okay, are you thinking of a work session, or are you thinking of an actual meeting to make adjustments?
That's the wish of the Assembly. If we wanted to try to make changes, but I'm sure we'll be lobbied during the readings of the
It's,
ordinance that sets it.
I guess from my perspective, I'd rather see a work session and give us a chance to talk about it, and then we can also make adjustments to it if we wanted to.
And the work session would be open to the public, I believe.
Yes.
Or would it not?
The work session would be open to the public, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And any changes that you guys would want made would have to be talked about at a meeting.
Right.
Well, we could
Non-binding discussions is what
Correct.
a work session is.
Yes.
Right. Make notes. So, if, sounds like it would be the wish of the Assembly to have a work session, now we just need to come up with a time. Who's going to come up with that? Jody, what works for you?
Whatever works for you.
Okay.
24th is a Monday, I believe.
Yep.
And I'm going to be gone this weekend, but I'll be here until Friday.
Monday?
No, actually, the 24th is a week from today,
Yep, week from today.
next Monday.
Which is a Monday, yes.
Okay, what time?
Well, I don't care. Yeah, 6 o'clock at night.
Well, let's see.
Morning's better for you, Jay?
My schedule varies. Actually, on that day, like lunchtime is like perfect for me during that day, like 11 o'clock, noon.
11 o'clock
One.
work for everybody?
Fine.
Because I'm assuming it's going to be more than half an hour,
I think that's a safe assumption.
a couple hours.
And I believe that the 24th is also the soapbox derby for the Cub Scouts up at the Elks, so that's in the evening.
Oh, okay, all right.
We don't want anybody to miss that.
Point
Okay,
taken.
that was easy. So it sounds like we've come up with a date and a time, April 24th at 11 a.m.
So I don't unfortunately have the assembly calendar on this computer at this time since they upgraded us. So Mindy has run to make sure that that's all going to work out, okay? I'll let you know if for some reason there's already something going on in here. I don't think there is.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't get to pick and choose? That's good.
No.
Looking at my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything from the mayor's report, but I think I pretty much covered it. So, all right, Steve, now it's time for the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. During routine maintenance at Power and Light last week, the main generator circuit breaker failed. This is our spare breaker, which was put in service several weeks ago. The hydro is now down until the breaker is repaired or replaced. We did bring a tech to town to try to repair the spare. He was unsuccessful. So Joe's working with trying to get the original breaker that has been out for repairs fixed faster and get it back to us. We're still on, Tyee and Swan Lake hydro. We're just not able to run our own hydro, which means our costs go up a little bit and our revenue goes down. So, anyway, heads up. Power and Light will be having on Wednesdays the diesel generator runs in preparation for the annual maintenance shutdown of the transmission system from Tyee, which is scheduled for the week of June 5th. Various departments are working together to upgrade and replace the Radix handheld meter reading equipment. This is the little handhelds that our meter readers use when they go out to pick up the readings for everyone. The units that we have now work fine, except they are no longer compatible with Windows 7 and are used to read both the electric and water meters, so we're having to replace them to keep up with the changes that is happening with Windows and Microsoft products. All trainees in the police department are doing very well and progressing on track. Special thanks to the communications training officers and the field training officers. Their efforts are much appreciated in getting our folks ready to do their job in and out. National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week was April 9th through the 15th. We'd like to recognize the great work our dispatchers do and thank them for their service. So if you happen to see one of our dispatchers, please tell them thank you for everything they do. Thanks to Carl and the Public Works crew for helping organize the impound lot, and to Barb Beasley and Callan Rossi for assistance in streamlining the impound process. Captain Hamilton and the rest of the patrol are working on impounding some of the derelict vehicles around town in our spring cleaning efforts. This is something that's challenge, trying to make sure that we do all the notifications we have to, and at the same time get the vehicles out of everyone's hair that have kind of junking up some of the streets. Kelly wanted us to kind of mention publicly, we have noticed a slight uptick in property crimes in suspicious circumstances. Folks are reminded to secure their property and keep things locked up. It's an unfortunate thing, but leaving things unlocked becomes a bit of a attractive nuisance, I guess. Simplex will be installing new fire panels in elderly housing and assisted living in the next month due to the failure of the system during a power outage. This is an older system, 2 different panels, and unfortunately, when it failed during the test, we couldn't get the system to hold the battery charges. So we have gotten a bid from them. We're in the process of doing that. It's actually on your agenda tonight to allow us to move forward to get that replaced. We actually only have about 30 days to get it done to stay in compliance with that facility. Planning work has begun at Parks and Rec for multiple events, including the Little Norway Festival. The ping pong paddle battle is coming back this year and will be on Wednesday, May 17th. Get your practice on. Tables are available for reservation at Parks and Rec. Also, the 4th of July, future committee meeting dates will be established after April 17th. If you are interested in joining the committee, they are looking for volunteers. Please call Parks and Rec for more information. Sandy attended grant-required Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Preparedness Conference and Local Emergency Preparedness Association and State Emergency Response Commission meetings in Anchorage, and the EMS Symposium and Southeast Region EMS Board of Directors meeting in Sitka over the last bit of time. Thanks to the fire and EMS volunteers who participated in the Early Childhood Fair. It's a great opportunity to get the volunteers involved in the community, even more so than what they do normally. We did see, as the Firefighter 1 course is coming to an end, we have seen participation in the course has dwindled, and we're real happy for the folks who are sticking to it, but it is an ongoing concern about having enough volunteers. Public Works crew demolished the burned-out trailer in the Island Mobile Home Park on April 12th. Actually took them a couple of days and was a real mess, to be honest with you. So working with the park owner to hopefully get it into a situation where they are not, more messes aren't created up there. So, but thanks to Public Works for all the work they did up there. City Creek Dam design is almost complete. Application for the work must be sent to the State Dam Safety Program for approval. Once that comes back, then we'll kind of know what the next step will be. We've been having some problems with our wireless network connections at the water plant in the Baylor, and we're trying to find a low-cost and reliable way to connect those borough facilities to our network to allow us to communicate and manage their systems. These are also our SCADA systems in some cases, so how we manage those and how our employees communicate and how we communicate with the employees is a big deal. It's currently with a wireless system, and we're trying to find a way to do that that's a little more reliable and is still affordable. CSWA, which is our the regional group that has gotten together to handle waste management issues, has developed a scrap metal recycling contract with Waste Management, Inc. The agreement sets up the potential to work with CSWA membership and waste management for removal of scrap metals and junk vehicles. The goal of the sanitation department is to only send scrap when a positive return on the material is possible. If it becomes necessary to send the metals at a cost to us, the cost will be brought to the assembly for approval prior to removal by waste management. So again, we're trying to watch this in a sense. Price on metal is good enough. We actually make a little bit of money on it in sanitation when this stuff's hauled out. Price falls, we'll hold off a little bit. And if we have to, just because of space restrictions, we'll bring it to the assembly. Carl is working with the elementary school for Earth Day activities focused on recycling. Try to keep that rolling and on people's mind. The Unimac Street residents have submitted a petition for the paving LID opportunity. They have submitted enough signatures in favor of it that it will start the next step. As of the writing of this report, only isolated parties from the other streets have submitted signatures. The next steps are to fine-tune the quote with CCON, draft an initial assessment roll, and schedule a public hearing on the LID. Tamako is substantially complete with the portico repair project at the Manor. They're about 6 weeks ahead of schedule and have been a pleasure to work with for everyone that's involved on that project. Senate Bill 28, which is the municipal land entitlement for Petersburg, passed out of the Senate on a 20-0 vote. Still hopeful that we can move this bill through the House before it adjourns, but it's going to have to appear in House Finance and then House on the floor, and we're past the 90 days at this point. So we're not exactly sure if this bill will get heard this year, but we're cautiously optimistic. Planning Commission is meeting, their meeting is scheduled for April 18th at 4:30 p.m. P&D excavated test pits at Scow Bay as part of that potential development project. This is to determine whether the soils out there are suitable for building on and or to be used as beneficial dredge spoils. Soils are mostly local blue clay, which was used to build the drive-down approach. Expect Dick Somerville to be back in town to present a preferred alternative and cost estimates on June 8th. Chamber announced Uncruise Adventures will make Petersburg a start-stop point on their itinerary next year. This means passengers will be spending 2 nights in Petersburg, if not more, as part of their cruise. So coming here ahead of time, not just stopping in for half a day and leaving. So it's good news for local visitor groups. Bill wanted me to remind everyone to please get their permits, parking, drive down, and launch permits. It's that time of the year. And she is off for the next 3 months, give or take, on maternity leave. So Ed will be our contact in the harbor and taking over the captain's seat while Lo's off having a baby. So that's it.
Okay, any questions of the manager on his report?
Just a question for Carl. Hey, Carl, how many people on that LID up on Unimac signed up for that? What was the percentage of the residents? Was it a full participation, or was it?
Right now, it's right at 65%.
Any other questions?
Yeah, along with that, Carl, I don't remember the name of the street that Unimac comes into. Is that already paved?
Odin Street,
Yeah.
the one at the bottom is paved.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. And it's unfinished business. It's ordinance 2017-03, and this is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, section 14.20.070 and 14.20.390A1, municipal harbors, to eliminate a prepayment discount on annual mortgage rates and to increase the minimum rental term to qualify for an annual mortgage rate. And this is the third and final reading. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Member Gregor, seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2017-03 in its third and final reading. Any discussion? Okay, will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
It passes unanimously. So ordinance 2017-03 is in effect. The next item on the agenda is ordinance 2017-04, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, section 14.16, electricity, to add a municipal power rate for certain municipal buildings of the Petersburg Borough as designated and approved by the Borough Assembly. This is the second reading. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt ordinance 2017-04. Is there any discussion on this ordinance? Bob?
Yeah, I'm still have to vote no on this, and I got to go back to Kathy and to Liz. I voted no the first time because I think it's inappropriate for us to take an enterprise fund, take funds out of it, and let other people have reduced rates, but then allow the rest of the users to pay increased rates. And we're talking just with what we've changed here, almost $100,000 a year. So somebody's got to pick up the difference. And I think it's inappropriate to do it this way. I'm not against funding, schools and hospitals, but I think this is the inappropriate way to do it. The other part of that, I would say, and I said this on the radio, is that sometime down the road, we've got to look at increases in O&M costs on our electrical utilities. And so then do we have to raise rates? But I think we have it fairly well evened out right now. And so I have to vote no for those reasons.
Any other comments? Eric?
Bob, I wonder, if there's a way, a sustainable way to be able to help decrease the rate to the hospital as well, but then also kind of stay level with the interest gained in those accounts. Being as that there's Joe, $5-7 million in those accounts. is there a way that we could maybe even provide a tiered or a step rate decrease, to the hospital, just in anticipation of the future declined funding from the state?
Yeah, I don't know if that is an option. I know I participated by phone in the last meeting, the first reading, excuse me, of this ordinance, and I voted no for it as well. And the reason was because I feel it's not because I don't want to help keep the school and the hospital viable in town, or any, make it so the library or whoever could stay open. But with the financial situation we're facing, and we don't really know exactly what that's going to be until the state's done formulating their budget, but it's not going to be, positive, I don't think. But like Bob was saying, if you reduce these rates, it's going to actually cost the enterprise fund money, the electrical enterprise fund. So that's going to have to, gain that money somewhere. Right now, they do have a pretty big balance, but I think we're working in the budget to let him, do some infrastructure repair around town, just so we don't have, since we have that money built up. I just think it'll be like another tax on people. And as later in the meeting today, we're going to talk about, raising tax caps, and so I'm not going to vote for the ordinance. I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe have an ordinance like this on the books that covered all of the, municipal buildings, and then if instead of just picking one out and then giving them like we did at the last meeting, the school potentially, we haven't done anything yet and finalized it, but I think if I'd vote for maybe the ordinance if it was just a thing, putting it on the books so it could happen. But I'm not in favor of implementing one right now, implementing a municipal rate. So a little long-winded, but any other discussion, Jay?
Yeah, I spoke to this last time, and I'll speak to it again. I was the one who made the amendment last time, for those who weren't listening, to include all the school buildings and the hospital. I chose those deliberately because I think we're going to have a long-term financial relationship, financial partnership, pick the word that you think fits right, and it struck me as a way that Power and Light will still be solvent, and we can help somehow two of the key pieces of community infrastructure we have in the school and the hospital. And I still feel that way. So consequently, I'd like to amend this ordinance to include the hospital in this ordinance.
Is there a second to that amendment?
I second that.
Okay, motion's been made to amend the ordinance to add the hospital to this municipal rate, and it's been seconded by Member Castro. Discussion on the amendment? Nancy?
I agree with what Kurt was saying earlier, that the hospital should be, since they have a chance to have income, should be operating as an enterprise fund. And I can't, I don't agree with adding it to the school isn't an enterprise fund, has no way of generating money. So, and the hospital does.
Okay. Any other comments? Kurt?
It seems like if this is just going to be an ordinance that we're going to be able to go into and look at and maybe even pick and choose in the future. I mean, just because we put the 14 buildings of the municipality, into, that we own or have partnership or whatever the terminology is, working relationship with, why would we just stop with this two, if that's the point, I mean, why isn't it on the books, and then we come back and look at the budget times, after reconsidering this, I mean, we don't know what the budget's going to look like. We don't know what, the participation from, the feds, or even as far as that goes, the state's going to be towards our community. So if we had all of these buildings on there, then we can come in and cherry pick, can we not? I mean, it isn't an all or nothing. I mean, I thought it was at our discretion on which buildings got the reduction or not. I'm just throwing that out there.
Steve, do you have an answer to that? I mean, how difficult would it be? I'd probably be confusing, at least, to implement an ordinance like this and then each year at budget time decide which building got the rate. I mean, how hard is it to change the municipal rate on an annual basis? There must be some confusion there.
Well, I'm actually speaking for Jody right now, and so she may jump in and tell me I'm lying. It's not that difficult to change it every year. I think it's really difficult for the different groups involved to do any kind of planning if it's maybe in, maybe out. That's why when we first wrote this, we attached a list of the potential buildings to it and asked the Assembly to say, here's a list of these buildings, pick and choose, and then let's call that good or turn the whole thing down. But again, we can change rates fairly quickly at our end. The problem is when you get into it's hard for the hospital to plan, it's hard for the school district to plan if suddenly the rates are going to jump on them after they've planned for them to not be there. So,
okay. Thank you, Steve.
Jody.
Jay, did you?
Yeah, a little further context. When all of those things were on the list, it came out to about 267,000-ish number that would be coming out of the Power and Light Enterprise Fund. With the hospital and the school, it takes it down to approximately 160. And at that rate, and that's why I feel strongly about this, Power and Light still makes money. That enterprise fund still makes money. I mean, no one wants to compromise the long-term health of any of the enterprise funds. And I just wanted to be really clear that I don't see a negative impact to that enterprise fund at that amount of money. And I feel very strongly about that one. I think the hospital and school should be included. My 2 cents.
Jay or Kurt?
One of the comments I made earlier today on the radio was that whether the money, we're going to end up having to pick up these expenses one way or the other, whether you're a property owner or whether you pay city sales tax, whatever it is, So if the electrical rates have to go up so that we can maintain the lifestyle that we've grown accustomed to in Petersburg, well, then they have to go up. But if we decide that we don't like having all the modern conveniences, and we don't like the school system we have, or we don't care for the hospital, we don't care for you pick anything, then we'll have to make the hard call to say we're not going to fund those things. But I don't think it would hurt us to have options on the table, to say, these are things that we could look at, and these are ways that we could either increase the revenues or decrease the revenues, But I think if we hem ourselves in, it might have been short-sighted just to pick one entity, it might be better off to just go ahead and amend it and throw them all in there, and then in the future, when we know what the budget's looking like, and we know maybe the state's going to, I hear they found a big oil strike up north, and be about 5 years before we see any benefit from that, if you can believe that the press releases, but, it might be the time then to re-examine how we're doing business. But so I think if we were going to make an ordinance that's going to give reduced rates to municipal buildings, that we own, I probably should be all of them at this point, as long as we can pick and choose.
Well, we have an amendment before us to just add the hospital at this point, and I can't remember the name of all the other buildings. But one thing we have to keep in mind why the electrical enterprise fund has this extra money is because we raised rates higher than what they needed to be to keep them, within their surplus budget that they needed years ago, so they could move the Power and Light building out to Scow Bay, and 10 years ago, so when I got on the council, that was overturned, but we kept building up the money, and now we have that money, and if I'm not mistaken, that's how the excess money got there. So, I was kind of, Jody?
I'd just like to say that if you did decide to add some other buildings, and then realize, that we're draining Power and Light's fund by too much, besides raising rates, which they could do, you could also, by ordinance, just change the number of buildings on that list or stop it altogether. It just takes 3 readings of an ordinance. So.
Right, so we can, even if we just add the hospital in this ordinance, we could add another building at any time by modifying the ordinance, correct? Same way?
Could, and I was looking today because I hadn't seen our attorney, Sarah Heidemann's revisions, and I didn't really like a couple of them, and I don't know if you're looking at the ordinance, but she did cross out buildings receiving a large commercial rate, and I really think we need to leave that language in there because there are a ton of borough buildings that are not on a large commercial rate, that this rate probably wouldn't even, it wouldn't benefit those buildings. So I was just hoping we could leave that wording in there. And maybe even get rid of where it says municipal school buildings, because really the school's buildings, I mean, those are the municipal buildings. Those are our buildings. So I think that it just makes it easier to change later if not everything says school on it everywhere. Just a thought.
So you lost me. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, one thing also, just like Darlene and Liz mentioned, is I appreciate how they said that the funds saved, could be allocated into the building fund, for a structure that we know is in dire need of repair or replacement, and getting back to like the taxation, we're eventually somebody's going to have to pay for that, and if it came out of a solvent electrical fund, where we aren't actually harming anybody, then really nobody is losing out. The electrical company just isn't forming the reserves in order to be able to do a number of large capital projects. We know we're good within the next 5 years, even with the inclusion of a new lineman, which I hope we get to hire. But I feel that, the entire community benefits from having a strong hospital system, and I would vote to include the hospital in with this ordinance.
Okay, so is there any other discussion on the amendment, which is to add the hospital to this ordinance along with the school buildings? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy?
No.
Bob?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
No. Okay, the amendment fails. Now we're back to the main motion, which is to adopt ordinance 2017-04 and giving the school buildings the municipal power rate. So any other discussion on that? Kurt?
If I understand correctly, no matter what building we have on there, it still has to come before the assembly to approve this electrical rate, does it not?
The way I read this actually, if I
were to amend this,
not mistaken, would give the school system a municipal rate. Am I mistaken?
Right. But I know I think what I'm getting at is that I'm trying to set ourselves up for the future of options, to be able to support all the buildings that we own, is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
All right, now I think I'm hearing you right. So you guys correct me if I'm wrong at this point. So all right, let's say for the sake of argument, this was approved, a school gets municipal rate. And for the sake of argument, 5 months down the line, we realize this is very detrimental to our reserves. Within 3 readings, it's gone if we want to vote it out.
Correct.
Meaning we're not.
Correct.
It's not like a charter change. We're not bound by anything. We decide we don't like something, we can be done with it in approximately 6 weeks, 3 meetings worth. Is this correct?
Correct.
Or adding something as well, if we wanted to, as Member Walhoder was saying, wanted to feel really strongly about X, Y, or Z, we could add that as well in 3 readings, just to clarify. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, you're catching me.
I got you now.
Yeah, right. So to take that one step further, is why don't we just add them all now? Because that doesn't necessarily mean that it's enacted correctly.
It does mean they're being enacted,
It would mean it would
We're
be
saying we're
enacted.
doing this. Is that right?
Well, it doesn't have to be. The original ordinance as it was, basically was saying that municipal buildings owned by the municipality that were large commercial could be offered this rate. Not that it was going to happen. And then there was a list of,
Gotcha.
and it said in it that every year the assembly would consider it at budget time and decide which buildings, if any, were going to get the municipal rate.
On a yearly basis.
Yes.
Or as decided by the assembly.
Yes. And now you can change that too. You could make it to where it's an option. The rate is in the books. And you guys, maybe you don't want to look at it every year. Maybe you want whoever wants the rate to come and request it, and then you guys take it up. I mean, there's different ways you can handle.
A lot of ways.
Yes.
Understood.
So in my mind, it gives us future options to look at, if we were to include the 12, 14 buildings, whatever it is, they're all in the same
It's
stroke of
15 on the
brush
list.
right now.
So currently, we're discussing only giving the school buildings, pool, that their buildings are associated with this municipal rate unless there's another amendment. So, then we could add, like Debbie just explained and Jay asked, we could add, at any time in the future, other buildings to this. I still feel that giving this municipal rate to the building, to certain borough buildings or entities is just, in a sense, another tax on the people that are going to have to pay the balance when the electrical fund gets down to a point where it needs more money. The rates are going to go up, and they're going to have to replace this money, which maybe we wouldn't have to if it's just the school, that's $96,000, but then like Jay talked to earlier, if we put all 14 on there, it's potentially $260,000 a year.
Right. Potential, yeah.
Potentially. Eric?
Yeah, I know, kind of like what Kurt's talking about over here, is that I feel it's a lot like the LID, where we voted in the ability for people to start a process. And if we were to include all 14 or 15 of these entities, the large commercial buildings owned by the municipality, then I feel that we're just giving ourselves the option of choosing which ones we would then give the 8% rate or the low municipal rate to. I like the idea of giving ourselves options and not being shoehorned into a certain thing. It is interesting learning the language, having the language clarified on the ordinance, that it isn't that we are giving them the 8% rate. It's just that we have the ability, they become eligible to be given that rate. It's interesting.
Okay.
Just one last point of clarification. I know it was all messy for Debbie. Even without changing that, we still have that option anyway, yes?
Yes, in 3 readings.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got another question. Maybe Joe can answer it. I think we pay 6.8 cents wholesale price to SEPA for our power. Is that correct? And what's the minimum you need to break even? 8? You figured in 8 cents a kilowatt hour? Is that what this municipal rate would be? If
the municipal rate as proposed now is at 8 cents. So
8 cents a kilowatt hour.
Basically, that would take care of the cost of delivering it. I think a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, the money that's in the reserve, like you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, is the result of the rates being set roughly 25 years ago to include a margin in there to fund the moving of the plant out the road. And some of that money has been spent to purchase the property and that sort of thing over the years, but in recent years, the community has decided that that's not a priority, and so that money is still there. So the enterprise fund is a nonprofit. It's supposed to generate enough money to handle its operation. And if there's more than that, then each year as we do our budget, we're supposed to adjust the rates. And if we're bringing in more money than we need, then we're supposed to lower the rates. If we're not bringing in enough, then we're supposed to raise the rates. But one thing that having that margin in there has done over the years is given us extremely stable rates. There's no other rate that you have on the books, whether that be water, garbage, whatever, that's anywhere near as stable as our rates have been. Again, the money in the reserve fund is ratepayers' money. Everybody that has a meter, everybody that pays an electric bill, that's their money. So whatever is done with it, I think you should keep that in mind, that it should, whatever you do, should benefit everybody, because not too many people on the island do not have an electric meter out there someplace. And lots of folks have multiple meters. The other thing is that enterprise funds in a municipality are used to augment or benefit the general fund. That's not an unheard of thing to do. There are a lot of communities that do set electrical rates to help out another department or a specific reason, that sort of thing. To me, it would be a lot more clear-cut if that's what we did. We said, okay, we're going to set the electrical rate so that there's a margin in there to take care of this item or this item or that item, and spell those out. And then on your utility bill, you would have your basic charge, you would have your kilowatt hour charge, and then you would have your charge for rate help, or whatever you want to call it, for the rate subsidies, whatever you want to call it. And then the consumer, the customer, knows exactly what they're paying for. So, and then finally, it's a little discouraging to me in the rate-making business. If you want to encourage people to make wise use of the energy, you typically will have a rate that is, the more you use, the more it costs. If you want to encourage them to use, you go the other way. Well, to my knowledge, none of these large accounts that we're talking about, whether that's a swimming pool, whether it's a hospital, none of them have made any effort that I'm aware of to save energy. They just want to go ahead and use as much as they want to use, and now they're looking for a break. I encouraged, especially the pool, to do something different from day one. We were able in the early years to get an interruptible rate from SEPA, very cheap rate. That was about 4 cents to heat the water up there. And I told them at the time, this interruptible rate's not going to be forever. And I think we kept it 5 to 7 years, something like that. And then it did go away. And then, of course, they had to pay the regular large commercial rate. And, of course, that was a tremendous shock on their bill. But still, no effort was made to either go to a different means of heating. The only thing that was done to actually save money was to put a pool cover on there, and of course Power and Light paid for that, to put the pool cover on there. So it's a little discouraging to me that, you know, when you have a budget and it's not coming together, there's two things you can do. You can either generate more revenue, or you can start cutting, you can start saving. And I would like to see something in this that would make it incumbent upon the applicant to show the assembly that they have, number one, that they have made some cuts, and number two, that they have made some effort to save and conserve or make good use of their energy.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Is there Nancy?
Let me get this clear. We have one more reading of this, right?
Correct.
If it if it fails, and this time, are we done?
Yes, correct.
And then, as far as changing what we decide in 3 readings, doesn't that just put it on a ballot for the population to vote for?
No.
This isn't going on the ballot. This is a decision made by the Assembly.
So we could end up raising property taxes without voting?
No, this is just power of the, given a municipal rate to the buildings. That's taxes is a totally separate issue. So, Kurt.
This is a Jody question. Jody, if the school doesn't get a break, how are they sitting this year for being able to cover their expenses versus, you know, we talked a while back about having to raise the mill rates to cover some of these expenses. So it seems to me like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and, you know, I mean, it's like a shell game to me with the money right now, you know. I mean, we're all going to pay somehow or another. So could you explain that to me on what would happen if we didn't pass this ordinance and give them a break?
Well, this question would be better for the school than I. As far as my involvement with the school and taxes right now, we're still planning on budgeting to give the school $1.8 million this year. We are trying not to use as much secure rural schools money that we have in a fund, because that has not been, that the federal government has stopped giving that to us. And so our fund balance is getting lower and lower. So this year, we are budgeted to give $400,000 of secure rural schools to the school and the $1.4 million property taxes to the school. So that is an increase of property taxes of $100,000, which we are planning on increasing the mill rate to account for that. For area-wide, we will do this, if the Assembly approves it.
Right. So, Mr. Mayor, may I just tag on to that? Without secure rural schools coming in, we'll drain that account that Jody's talking about, that where the $400,000 is coming out of. So, I mean, we can do the math and figure it out that at some point that account will be empty, and the borough will be faced with short funding the school from where they're funded today. So, I mean, that's a, you know, it comes back to a decision about how much can you cut other things. When talking to the school, and I don't think I'm, you know, talking out of turn, Erica has said, you know, one of the first things she'd have to look at are activities, and including the swimming pool. I think her estimate, because the school is the one who pays the utility bills on the aquatic center, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000 a year that the swimming program costs the school. So, you know, if the school had it cut, that would be clearly something that they would seriously look at. And one of the ways they would cut would be to kill that program, which then in turn means the revenue doesn't come in. And so the borough would be sitting there going, fine, if the utility bills can't pay and we can't pay it another way, then we're back to having to close the pool. So it's this symbiotic relationship between the school, the hospital, and the borough, and how, where money goes and where it comes from. And a cut to utility rates helps us avoid maxing out mill rates in some cases. It also keeps the school with the funding that, you know, they're getting right now. There's other ways to handle that, as you've talked about, which means we could go to the school and say, after this year, we're going to start cutting your funding by $100,000 a year till we get it down to what the minimum is. That will have an impact on this community in some pretty bad ways. So I mean that's what we're dealing with. I mean, this proposal came up through some joint meetings between the school, the hospital, and the borough, talking about ways to lessen the impact of loss of federal funds. By no means will solve the problem, but it is a step in that direction. If that's not the way the community wants to go, then so be it, and then we'll continue to look for other ways to either make cuts in some of those areas or try to look at raising revenue. Anyway, makes some sense.
And we still aren't, well, we don't know if secure rural schools will be funded this year.
The assumption is no, but you're correct. We don't know for sure.
So, anyway, we're back to the main motion to adopt this ordinance with only the school receiving a municipal power rate, and that can be changed as we talked about. Any other discussion? If not, clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Okay, that passes the ordinance 2017-04, passes in its second reading, 4-2, with members Lynn and Jensen voting no. The next item on the agenda is ordinance 2017-05, an ordinance proposing an amendment to the Home Rule Charter of the Petersburg Borough to allow the city of Kupernof to own and operate a harbor within the Petersburg Borough, and directing that the proposed charter amendment be submitted to the qualified voters of the borough. It's the second reading. I'll entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Walhooter to adopt this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2017-05 passes unanimously, 6-0. Before we go on to new business, does anybody need to take a little 5-minute break, or should we continue? Okay, we'll trudge ahead. New business. First item under new business is ordinance 2017-06. This is an ordinance proposing amendments to chapter 4.28, sales tax of the Petersburg Borough Code to increase the sales tax exemption cap for a single sale from $1,200 to $5,000 and to eliminate the exemption for the sale of goods purchased within the borough for the use outside the borough, and directing that the proposed code amendments be submitted to the qualified voters of the Petersburg Borough. Entertain a motion to adopt this in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn. Any discussion?
Nancy?
Nancy?
Well, this is another thing that we will put before the voters to.
This is what, yes.
And I believe it's Juneau, whose tax cap is $12,000, and Sitka's about to raise theirs to $12,000. $5,000 seems reasonable.
Okay, and on the news today, I heard Joe give a little rundown there on the last 2 times this was put on the ballot, and when it was, I can't remember what it was first time, 2,000 I think was going to be the cap, and it failed by a couple hundred votes roughly, and then the last time it was 1,700 and it failed by 6 votes. So we'll see what we get when we ask for 5,000, but yeah, it goes to the voters.
How long ago were those votes?
I can't remember. Joe had the dates, but yeah, so it's been 5 years or so. So I don't see a lot of people in the room opposing it, but Bob?
I need to, since I was one that kind of was pushing these two to be put onto the ballot, I've been contacted by about a half a dozen people relative to the point-of-sale businesses here in town. I'm about due to change my mind, and here's why. When they talk to me on the point-of-sale issue, a number of them talk about that these are local-owned businesses. These businesses hire people locally. Those people spend money in Petersburg, and pay taxes and so forth. A number of them have told me that, yes, if we did away with the point of sale, that not all their business would go away, but some portion of it would go away. And, I've heard numbers anywhere from 10% to 50% of it would be affected. And what they were saying, you may collect some additional taxes, but overall you're going to lose, because you're going to lose some property tax, you're going to lose real sales tax, et cetera, in town. And they make a pretty good point. And I meant to, Jody and I talked about it, and I don't remember what we talked about with what we thought this would bring in. Do you recall, just a guess?
No, there isn't really any way of knowing, and especially if someone, for the point of sale, if someone's shipping something out of town, it's probably pretty large, I would guess, in a lot of cases. So you just don't know.
So
I think it wouldn't be that much, probably.
So
but.
Do you think, using my logic there and from talking with folks, would the offset, would we be better off, I'm running this through my own mind now, is the offset, the amount of money we collect and what we would lose, would it be Mox Nix, would just...
I really can't answer that question, Bob.
I guess if I...
Go ahead, Steve.
One of the questions that we've had as we've debated this, which is, so what we're doing by giving these folks in other words, saying people who come to Petersburg and buy things and saying you don't have to pay taxes on it, you're basically giving preferential treatment to people who don't live here and asking the people who do live here to pay for it. In other words, people who live here have to pay sales tax, they have to pay property tax if they own a home or property. And they are the ones supporting the infrastructure here. Somebody comes to town and has a bunch of fish processed on a fishing trip, they're not paying tax on it if it's shipped out of here. So why is that different than any one of the assembly members catching a fish and having it processed? You're going to pay sales tax on it. I guess that's kind of the the logic we ran into is how do we kind of make this work?
And that's what some of the lodge owners also have been talking about, is that, we bring the business to town, you wouldn't have had those sales taxes and so forth, even though they ship them out, but we bring them to our seafood processors, they take care of them, smoke them, what have you, and send them out. So you're already collecting revenues. Revenues because you have workers in town, who are working, who pay sales tax, who pay, other things here in town. That's the argument that I'm hearing.
And you're right, there is a relationship. One of the big questions is why don't other Alaska communities do this? I mean, Juneau, for example, charges sales tax on, if you go to Juneau and say, I live in Petersburg, so I want to buy all this stuff tax-free, they're not going to sell it to you.
You used to be able to. You used to be able to buy a $25 tax card.
Right. And today, that's just not how, basically, you pay sales tax where you are. Again, this is an assembly level and a community level decision, but that's the stuff that we've debated with is how do we kind of make this work where we're basically giving an out-of-town visitor a break on sales tax that we won't even give to our local residents.
Eric, you had a comment?
Yeah, and I don't feel that we're harming, my uncle coming down and catching, 3 king salmon and getting it processed at Coastal, that's kind of penny pocket change right there. But here, in this set of graphs that Jody ended up putting together, there's over $3 million worth of out-of-town exemptions just for seafood processing alone. That's big business. I mean, that's thousands of pounds of fish, and so that's bigger than I feel than just the kind of the average family member shipping stuff back home.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously, several different points raised on that. From my end of things, I'll definitely be voting for this to put it on the ballot, because I think it should be a community decision, and I hope it makes it to the ballot.
Any other comments? The way I'm reading this is they wouldn't be separated. They would go on the ballot, voting for both of them at the same time, or are they going to be separate?
Total separate
items?
questions.
Okay, that makes sense, because then if it wasn't going to be that way, I would want it to be that way on the ballot. So, I'll vote in favor of this, and if it raises enough hackles, we'll have all kinds of people here for the public hearing.
Kurt, a quick comment on how I'm going to vote on this is that, raising that tax gap from $1,200 to $5,000, I know is going to, put more money in the pockets of the general fund, but it's going to come out of the pockets of those of us that are already paying taxes. It's not going to affect anybody that's tax exempt, which I believe is over 500 and some people on the books now. And so, but, if it's going to, put a little bit of money into the coffers, I'll do it. And getting to the point of sales is that if I call Juneau and have some things ordered and have them shipped down because they're unavailable in this community, then I don't pay taxes. But if I walk up to the counter and give them my credit card, then I pay full boat. So I think we're just going in line with what everybody else is doing with this point of sales thing. So I'll be voting for it.
I'm not sure it's that way with Juneau. Juneau not only charges tax if you sign up for a class online. When they come down to teach the class, they collect Petersburg sales tax. In addition, they collect CBJ taxes.
All I know is some of the business that I have done with hydraulics and things like that, if I call up there and they send me a part down, I'm not having to pay the Juneau City sales tax. But if I were to walk in and say, I called you on the phone, paid for the thing, can I pick it up here? And they go, well, now I have to charge you tax. So, I mean, that's just from my experience within the last, 4 months or so. So anyway, not to beleaguer the point.
Okay, any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2007-2 21706 passes in its first reading. Next is a resolution, and it's Resolution 2017-08. This is a resolution authorizing the expenditure of funds not currently budgeted for Mountain View Manor to contract with Simplex Gunnell and Nordic Electric to correct fire alarm systems deficiencies at the Mountain View Manor Assisted Living and Elderly Housing Facility. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So move.
Second.
A motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Walhuter to adopt this resolution. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that resolution passes unanimously, so it's something we have to fix. Next item is Resolution 2017-09, a resolution approving an application to purchase Borough Land, Lot 7, Block 35, Southeast Addition Subdivision, Plat 73-965, U.S. Survey 1252, Section 27, T58S, R79E, located at 205 3rd Street, parcel 0107647, and exempting the purchase and sale from public auction per the provisions of Municipal Code, Section 16.12.080E. We'll entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Member Greger, seconded by Member Strand. You guys are quick.
We're on.
Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
You're welcome, Kim. Sorry to make you wait so long. Just that you have to stay in order or we'll be totally lost. Okay, next item on the agenda is authorization to send a letter to the U.S. Coast Guard and the federal delegation regarding the future role of Petersburg as a Coast Guard home port. And we've been having this discussion on the Assembly for quite a few years, realizing that they're reconfiguring their fleet. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, they've commissioned the first one on the West Coast, the FRC 154-foot class cutter in Ketchikan. And sounds like if they keep their funding moving forward through the federal government, the Anacapa will be decommissioned in 2021. So that's only 4 years away. And just with talking with the Coast Guard personnel and with our federal lobbyists, we decided we should be a little more proactive, and that's how we came up with this letter. So there's been an addition to it that our other federal lobbyists or his partner Zeb O'Kelly has put in. It's just adds to what has been presented on the agenda, just the basically the size of Petersburg's fleet, and we employed in 534 workers through all the processors in town, and how many pounds of product we deliver and blah blah blah. So also, I believe there's one of the people from one of the local processors is writing a letter, to try to keep a cutter in Petersburg just because of our size of our fishing fleet and where we fish, and to respond to Chatham Strait, Point Gardner, that neck of the woods from Ketchikan, it'd take you twice as long to get there from Petersburg and Frederick Sound, that whole area. So anyway, I would encourage us to send this letter. Is there any opposition?
Just two comments on it. One is how far would we be willing to go to help ensure that they come here? For instance, if we need to extend that dock, the 95 feet or so on and so forth, if they have something else, are we willing to put money into it? Or how far are we willing to go, I guess is what my question is what raised. I like the ideas in the letter. I'd like just kind of a discussion to hear where we're at.
From my perspective, that's what's been frustrating, because it's been a couple years I've been visiting District 17 headquarters in Juneau, talking with the admirals and the commanders, with their captains, and they say they haven't made any decisions where they're going to be, the other cutters are going to be stationed, but then you hear 4 up in the Central Gulf, so unless they go with what, I'm not sure if Murkowski and Sullivan have put this forward, but I know Senator Sullivan was going to work on this issue, and conversation I had with him was he thought it'd be, good if they put one in each port where they were before. But then if you look at the shore-based efficiencies, they claim they could, with 29 people on shore, 24 hours, 7 days a week, you could give them one ship support. With 30 people, you can give support for 2 ships. So those numbers, that's the ones the Coast Guard presented to Sullivan's staff. So, I'm not sure. And Steve, what was the email we got just about Somerville was looking at extending the dock to 115 feet glow?
Yeah, through back channels we heard, and I have not been able to confirm it, that P&D had been engaged by the Coast Guard to do some work here in Petersburg on the Coast Guard floats. That would be wonderful if true, and it sounded like the modifications would be enough to handle a 155. But I don't have any way to confirm that yet. That's private information with P&D. And I think it's it's gossip until I hear it probably from the Coast Guard or P&D directly. So,
Nancy?
Rumor control aside, is this a sort of thing that could be covered by a grant? Are there grants out for that, or?
That I'm not sure of. For harbor infrastructure, I'm not sure.
Not that I'm currently aware of.
But both ones, over the last month and a half or whatever the time's been, when Senator Sullivan was in town and Congressman Young, they were both toured the Coast Guard moorings, and not, they got shown where they were and showed all the housing and how much of an impact it would be to Petersburg if we lost that, 16 or 20 people in town, and showed them Scow Bay and talk of, maybe if a bulkhead was put in there, it could be a Coast Guard facility. But, I don't know, Bob, how to answer your question.
Yeah.
I would think the borough should be in favor of, only way to get the money, of course, to do harbor infrastructure modifications to accommodate them.
It would be some pretty major infrastructure and with some pretty big time costs, and of which would have to go to the voters to approve as far as any kind of a tax increase or mortgage increase, whoever was going to pay for it. So it'd be costly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, as part of that, my only thought would be to add a sentence in there, something to the effect that we would be willing to work with them to help meet their needs, or, just in some way or other. Add a sentence in here to some extent.
Yeah, I've read it a couple times. I can't remember. There's nothing.
Not that I read, but I think it would be good to do something like that.
Steve, could we add a little blurb in there, so Debbie, somewhere that,
Of course.
we're if they'll talk to us and tell us what their plans are, we're willing to work with them. Jay?
A whole lot easier if we knew.
Yes.
Yeah. Jay?
No, in short, I think it's a very well-written, clear letter, and I'm definitely in support of it.
Okay, great. All right. But, no objections, Eric?
It is interesting, too, how they say here, if we're going to lose the Anacapa in 2021, and then the 50-year lease expires 2027, what Coast Guard's motivation would be to station another cutter here if they're ending or losing a lease, and if the borough is not financially sound enough to complete the modifications necessary on the harbor. It's a tight spot right there as it is. With coming out as a Forest Service skiffs, 110 sticks out pretty far. An additional 40 feet would be pretty big.
Stick down there ways.
Not undoable.
Not undoable.
Not undoable, yeah.
And worth doing.
I think if I remember what the engineer told me, you put them in gear and you're doing 6 knots too, so.
So they'd have a hard time.
They've got a plan ahead. Okay, well, if there's no other, Debbie, do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. So before you vote, is it with the addition of the other paragraph that's in the email?
Sure. I mean, I think that's all right, just to put in some, I think they know the significance of the fishing fleet to Petersburg, but that'll. Okay, so next item on the agenda.
Are we going to vote?
Oh, yeah, all those in favor of sending a letter, say aye.
Aye. Oh, okay.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thanks. We didn't
Unanimous.
motion, but it doesn't matter.
6.
Thanks.
Well, I thought we talked about the authorization to send a letter to blah, blah, blah.
Okay, good enough.
Okay, item 17-115, authorization to continue the contract of legal representation from Sarah Heidemann, doing business as Heidemann Law Offices. I'd entertain a motion to authorize that contract.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Greger to authorize to continue legal representation from Sarah Heidemann. Have a motion? Oh, there was, okay. Discussion. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, communications, we have a letter here from the medical staff, and they are encouraging to keep fluoridation in the water system, and they're just, I think there was some other communication, Tamara Evans sent another letter, I don't know if everybody got the email, something else to read, opposing.
Emailed it to everyone.
Opposing the fluoridation, and another letter from Sandy Volk, who's been in the dentistry business here for many, many years, and she supported it. So I guess at this point, since there's an initiative petition out there, we'll see how that goes, and if it's going to end up on the ballot, the people that are concerned on one side or another can lobby the voters. So I don't know if it's a topic we need to have on the agenda again, but it's just talking about communications.
Mike, was that what Liz was still sitting here for? Liz, were you still sitting here to be able to read that letter to the, on record, or was that, or you just still here?
The letter, it wasn't asked to be read into the record, was it? So it's just a letter, basically.
Okay, I just didn't want to.
Just to confirm what the mayor said, at this point, it's in the initiative process, so it's, people want to write letters to the editor, that we're fast getting to that point more so than, it'll be out of your hands, I guess, is kind of my point.
Right, once they get the petition moving forward. Okay, discussion items, recognitions. Does anybody have any recognitions? Eric?
Yeah, I'd actually like to recognize Petersburg's roller derby team for taking the win over Wrangell. That was a really impressive match, and is good to be part of it. Yeah, and I was, as standing there in the center of the ring, I was able to look out and count, and I counted, plus minus 10, about 200 people. So it was really good turnout.
Oh, great! Yeah.
And even though I'm on rollerblades too, not roller derby, but anybody can stand up on 4 rollerblades. But anyway, versus roller hockey. Anyway, good luck in Palmer, girls.
Okay, any other recognitions? Okay, the next item under Assembly discussion items was brought up by Assemblymember Lynn, Borough property assessments. Bob?
Yes. There were a number of us, Kurt and Nancy and Cindy and I were on the BOA this year. And I want to thank, though, first of all, the people who came forward and presented their case. We didn't make any changes in those, but collectively, there was a number of things I think came forward that I really think we need to look at in next year's when we do. And some of them, frankly, I think we need to look at some reappraisals. So a little bit with that, let me get specific. The lots on Nordic and out on Sandy Beach were done in a class, and I won't get it right off the top of my head, but for instance, Sandy Beach was from 0 to 12,000 square feet, I believe. And based on that, it was one value. A number of the folks that came forward, and then on Nordic Drive was from 0 to, let's say, 6,000 or 8,000. I don't remember exactly what it was, and that was another value. And I can understand how they came up with some changes, but the point that some of the folks were making that came forward to us is that although, it's up to 12,000 feet, our particular lots only have 6,000 square feet in it. Why are you charging me? Why are you making the classes so big, the 0 to 12,000? Why don't you do it on a square foot basis and then put a value associated with that? Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not going to make that judgment, but I think they make a valid point that it needs to be looked at. That was one point. The second, another point is that on Wrangell Avenue, and some of those, we had Nordic Drive, and then we had Rango Avenue behind that. And in Rango Avenue, that was another class. But as the folks got to talking about that, I'm not sure in my own mind after I looked at that is whether that should all be one class or whether that should be broken up and something else with. But I think enough people have brought some of these thoughts forward that I really think that our assessor needs to take a look at that, at those items, because those folks were making some pretty good sense there, that we have some things that I think our methodology needs to be looked at. And with that, I'd see where Kurt and Nancy are, if they have anything else to add or change.
Any comments?
Well, one of the points I brought up was I used a Fred Wall, 58-foot limit saner, which is $3 million worth, where I could go down and buy a 58-foot wooden saner, with half the capacity or less. And why would I pay $3 million for that? So blocking those pieces of property into 0 to 12,000, and so forth and so on, it just seemed a little unfair to me, where everybody already knows what the square footage of your piece of property is. And I thought that if you could go ahead and assess whatever you want to that particular square foot, and then you just times it by how much property the person owns, well, then that's what their evaluation for their property should be, instead of these just one-size-fits-all kind of things. And that was the biggest complaint. We had a couple of people there that were complaining that they're paying the 12,000 square foot rate when they only had like 6,000 square feet. So, however they're going to do it, it's something that I think that we need to be a little more aware of, and, so that everybody feels like they're getting, the same shake as the next person. So,
any other comments? I wasn't involved in the BOE this year, and I've been on a couple of them, but is there certain standards, Jody, can you answer the question that, I know there is in some realms of the assessment that the assessor has to follow, state guidelines of some kind of regulation? I'm not using the right word.
As far as valuation?
Or just methodology that he uses, or is there not?
Yes, but I am not an assessor, and I cannot.
Well, that's why we should have, like we talked earlier, we should have him involved in this discussion if
and
we're
I
going to
could have him call in at the next meeting if, based on what Bob's thoughts were, and talk about it if the assembly would like.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking that we need to go back and take a look at next year and see what we need to do. I'm not arguing one way or another, but we didn't do, in my opinion, very good job of explaining why we had those breakouts.
Yeah, I agree.
At all in that meeting.
And they'll be here this fall, so doing revalues and such. So then would be a good time for him to come, Mike Renfro, and maybe just give a little talk with the assembly.
That would be a good idea, I think. Yeah. Okay, so does that cover that topic pretty much? That we'll invite him down when it's appropriate?
Well, one quick comment there, and then I'll let it go. He did say when he was sitting there that he was going to reevaluate the way they do it. So if any input from us would be helpful at any time, it'd be great. We throw our ideas out there, and maybe then we may not even have to have a formal meeting. If we just have some questions, and just see.
Are you saying he'll be in town anyway? Or?
This fall he will.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we could just plan it. Mm-hmm. Maybe if we could coordinate a meeting with him. Mm-hmm. Okay. The next item on the agenda is something I put there. It's in regards to either letters that are brought forward or resolutions that are brought forward that the Assembly considers, votes on, takes actions on. That I think it's a good idea if one of us is lobbied by a group of people or an individual to put a resolution forward, that's stated when the resolution is put into place, the names of the people. This resolution that we 2017, I think it was 07, and I'm not saying the vote was wrong. I'm just saying that it was opposing the House bill or HR 232 of Don Young's, that some of the information, the map, for instance, was talked about being on his bill. It involved, in connection with his bill, but it wasn't. There was no map. And I asked Steve to look into it. The map, as far as we can tell, well, it was given to us by the the Greater Southeast Alaska Conservation Community. Haven't found a copy of that map anywhere, but back in 2009, I believe Governor Parnell formed a task force, a state timber task force. I don't think that's the right name, but they came up with a recommendation to how to boost the timber industry in Southeast Alaska. Or I don't know if it was the Chugach as well, but they came up with a bunch of plats of land. Maybe that's where the map came from. But I just think it would be beneficial if the people that encourage somebody to put something on the agenda for consideration are named. So, any other discussion, Jay?
Yeah. Sorry, it's getting late and I'm a little simple-minded, but to what benefit?
To what benefit?
Yeah.
My benefit I would consider it being a benefit if we were, for instance, SEAC presents an issue, and we're opposing this transfer of state land to federal land of the state. I think the public should know who's presenting the information and that we're making a decision on, and make sure it's valid information.
Okay.
And I don't want, Member Lagadakis stated that she's the one that brought this resolution forward. At one point in the communications, there was a group of people that she was working with that drafted the resolution, and they added it back and forth together, and then it came to the, and I don't know who the people were, asked what their names were, in a group of fishermen and some people from the community, and Forest Service employees. So I don't want to lose jobs by, if this, I don't think this bill is going to go through anyway, like I stated before, but if it did, it could have potential effect on the economy of Petersburg. Positive or negative, we don't know. So, anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there just for consideration. I mean, it's just like when we talked about the Coast Guard letter earlier, just, that's where it came from, was just communications we had with different people in the mix, and decided it was a good idea to be a little more proactive, write a letter. So I don't know, I'm not picking on anybody. I just think it would be good if the whole thing was in the open.
Transparency is good.
Eric, any comments?
And take ownership in whatever's coming forward.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, with that being said, I think the next item on the agenda might be entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
So move. Oh, I was going to try to do the three of us.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.